You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Well, welcome to another edition of Global Trade This Week, where myself, Doug Draper, I'm your co-host, and my buddy who's usually on the East Coast but is now on the West Coast, Pete Mento.
Hey,
Mr.
everybody.
Pete, you
Hey,
have
pal,
had.
how are you?
I'm doing good. So I'm excited about this episode of Global Trade This Week. Obviously brought to you by Cap Logistics and Keenan pushing the buttons. This is going to be a good one. But I'm not sure if it's liquor in your cup right there or if that's coffee to wake yourself up. But you've had a whirlwind in the last week, my friend. How is LA treating you?
I was going to say that this week's edition of Global Trade This Week is also partially sponsored by my hangover. I have been. There's a great song by Jimmy Buffett called "Son of a Sailor," where he says, "I have been drunk now for over 2 weeks." I think I'm there.
Yeah.
I think I have been drunk now for 2 weeks. I'm in LA for TPM. I flew in yesterday morning from Mardi Gras. Happy Mardi Gras Day, everybody. We are filming on Tuesday. Happy Mardi Gras Day. I have been, with the exception of a couple of nights when my daughter was with me, I have been power drinking for since February 17th, and today's March 1st. So I mean I have been bringing it for a couple of weeks now, and as most of you know who know me, I stopped drinking every year at Lent, and I think that my body is going to be so happy tomorrow morning when I start, drinking ice water again to try to get my crap back together, buddy. So yeah, I'm back. I'm alive.
That's good. Well, I appreciate you making it from your hotel room, and we'll just get this party started.
Yeah, buddy.
No pun intended. So I opened. You kick off, man. What do you got?
Yeah. From a relatively fun, you just mentoed me. We went from like a relatively fun topic to something depressing. Good job, Doug. We cannot have this Global Trade This Week. We cannot have a show without talking about Ukraine, given what's going on right now, what's happening in the world. And everyone's seen the news reports. Everyone has certainly taken a look at what's happening around the world. I wanted to talk about it specifically from the aspect of people who are engaged in global trade. So first of all, Doug, very important news that came out overnight is that many of the ocean liners are talking about suspending services. They have. Maersk actually came out this morning and said they are considering it as well and plan to make an announcement at some point today where they will simply not be moving containers under any flag whatsoever into the former Soviet Republic. And it's I mean, that is big. Swift Bank has been turned off for most of the transactions that Russia will be working with by many of the countries that engage with it. You're looking at economic warfare in a scale that without the internet and without the technological increases that we've seen around the world over the course of our careers probably would not have been possible. And because we work in logistics, you and I work in this world of global trade and compliance, I'd be remiss if I didn't also discuss the fact that we have tremendous sanctions that are being put in place, export controls as well, and a hammering down globally by pretty much the entire global community of the export of technology to Russia. And there's very much going to be a line in the sand that's drawn that says you are either working with the broader global community or you're working with Russia. Even China has backed off in their friendship with Russia over Ukraine. I do worry about this because it is a major escalation. I'm very sorry for the people of Russia as someone who spent an inordinate amount of time in that country and knows a lot of Russian people. When you put those sorts of economic consequences on any country, it's going to have lasting, damaging effects on their population. And I think that we should keep that in mind. But like everyone else, I don't know if you've been to Ukraine, Doug, but I've been a number of times. Beautiful place, beautiful people. And it's hard for me to conceive in 2022 that there is a land war in Europe happening right now while you and I are talking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's I think you nailed it with the sense that, if everybody in every industry can do a little bit to place sanctions, I think you nailed it to say you're either with us or against us on a global scale. So it's good to hear the steamship lines. You're in the thick of it out there, Pete. So to hear what they're doing, that's just
Yeah.
one additional thing that they have control over that they can implement a sanction. And there's other groups out there, they're doing their part a little bit at a time and over time, hopefully sooner than later, that will be, break the bow and go from there. So I like the fact that everybody is collaborating kind of somewhat in a negative aspect to sanction Russia. But I like the
Yeah.
fact that everybody's doing a little bit, do what you can, right? In different industries and different facets, whether it's financial sanctions or whether it's literally the movement of goods to and from. So it'll be interesting. And I think that, you can be very definitive on how you attack, but you need to be calculated a little bit on how you react. Because if you go one way or another too fast, too soon, you could spin out of control and not have the impact and the direct effect that you're looking for. So the fact that there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that going on a global scale, is what needs to take place right now.
Yeah, buddy. And I still worry about further escalations. I worry about what happens next, where the idea of putting a no-fly zone, that's basically saying if you fly over the Ukraine, we're going to shoot you down. That's an act of war that I don't think will be well received by bad Vlad Putin. And I know that we talked about all of this in our prediction show, and I've been saying for a while I expected this to happen. I did not expect the global community to rally as quickly and to be as supportive as they have been. It's been shocking. I thought that no one would do a darn thing about it. So it has been nice to see the reaction, Doug.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you made a point to talk about, the elephant in the room. I'm going to pivot a little bit and not talk about that. And my soon to become my favorite transportation mode, which is trains. And I caught this article. So this topic, Pete, is autonomous trains the answer to our congestion here domestically? And the reason I like that is that I read this statement, which makes total sense to me, which is the running of an autonomous train on a fixed track seems much safer than running an 18-wheeler without drivers on our highways. And so I think that we talked about the autonomous nature, and everybody's been talking about what can we do here, what can we do there. We're going to deliver pizzas autonomously and groceries and things of that nature. But I think the one aspect that is being overlooked is the fact that trains are on a fixed rail. The autonomous nature of what's happening in a lot of trains, especially out west, are in wide open areas that can be safe testing grounds. I know a couple years ago, actually in Pueblo, Colorado, they ran a heavy freight train 48 miles without any humans on board. So my point here is that the autonomous nature of transportation is continuing to evolve. There's been pockets of this is the next wave, that's the next wave, this is the next creative idea. But I think right in front of us that we see every single day is the autonomous nature of trains. I think has a lot of runway and a lot of potential. I may even call it RailTech and the technology around that. The biggest hurdle from doing some research on this, Pete, is labor. The relations, the negotiations with the labor that's in place with Class 1 railroads could be a little challenging. But I am very bullish on the rail industry. I said before in a different topic that I think they can exploit in a positive way their sustainability record with the amount of goods they can move over a distance with minimal impact on their carbon footprint. I think that's a huge win for them that they should be promoting. And I think this autonomous nature of moving their goods across the country, especially out here in the West, has a lot of legs. And I think if the rail industry and associations that represent the rail can position themselves with these two things as leading indicators, I think we're in good shape, and it's going to be very bullish for the rail industry in the next couple of years.
Love this topic. I'm a big fan of rail for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is the environmental impact. I'm a big fan of autonomous methods of transportation because I see the upward integration, that supply chain and the innovation that goes into it being a really important part of America's dominance economically into the future. And originally what I was worried about, Doug, was, cows walking on tracks. And that kind of stuff. But I've got to believe if we can make Teslas safe enough to drive with people walking across streets, there's got to be a way that they could, seemingly create some sort of intelligence where if something's walking close to a track, it alerts somebody, some sort of proxy alarm or something. So that really pushed it away. Your labor issue is one that I really do worry about. The labor unions for trains are extremely powerful, and they are akin to those longshoreman unions that right now we're all sort of white knuckling, waiting to learn more about here at TPM. Very little's being said, by the way. It's very quiet. But I think the answer to so many of our problems with congestion is what you're talking about, which is reliable, repeatable, steady, boring but steady and reliable and environmentally less impactful rail. I think it's going to take a lot of money from the federal government and pressure put on them to do it. And there's a lot of trucking companies who I think are worried about their livelihood being taken away from them. I don't think that'll be the case. There's always going to be a play for over-the-road movement, but getting it to those depots far off, Doug, I think you hit the nail on the head. We've got to invest in the infrastructure to make something like this a reality. And once we see how good a job it can do, I think it could be a real game changer for all of us.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, we like the halftime. So, Pete, why don't you go? You got a good topic? Fire away, my friend.
Yeah, man. So halftime by our good friends at Cap Logistics. I have just come back from Mardi Gras. If you go to New Orleans, I hope you see the Mardi Gras. Just like Professor Longhair saying, it is a magical city. There was a great line by I think it was Upton Sinclair. I forget exactly what he said, but he said there are really only a couple of real cities in America. There's Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and New Orleans. Everything else is Cleveland. And I don't want to make fun of Cleveland because I kind of like that town too. But in reality, there is no other place in the world that gets along as well, in America especially, than New Orleans, where all this mix of people, all these mix of cultures, all these mix of races and ideas find a way to make it all work. My mom used to tell me when I was a kid that if you took lard by itself and ate it, and wheat by itself and ate it, and salt by itself and ate it, it wasn't going to taste real good. But if you mixed them all together, you made biscuits. And that's what New Orleans is to me. It's a bunch of things that on their own don't make sense, but when you put them all together, they're beautiful. And Mardi Gras, although it is hectic and chaotic and crazy, it is not what most of you think. It is not some bacchanalia of girls running around with their shirts off and college kids misbehaving. That happens in the French Quarter. Mardi Gras is a family event. It's where people get together and we share our love of the city and love for each other. And we kind of get our yah-yahs out, which is a great way of putting it. Not the way you think it means. On our way into Lent, we get all of our crazy out before we focus on ourselves, our spirituality, and hope to make ourselves better people before Easter. So for all of you who come from places like Mobile, Alabama, places like Galveston, Texas, places like New Orleans that are celebrating Mardi Gras today, you're in my heart with me. And for all my friends in New Orleans, especially those who made it through Ida last year, those that are sitting down in those bars all over the place, people that are staying all over the place at Zulu right now on Canal Street in Poydras. I love all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful Mardi Gras. That's what I got, Doug.
Nice. Well, we talk about that pivot sometimes about good news and bad news, but this is so, Pete, I was going to chime in on virtual real estate and NFTs and really send you for a tailspin, but I don't think you can handle that in your current state
Do
today.
it.
So
Do it.
I'll save that for a different day because I do have some good stories with that. But just literally yesterday, I decided to pivot and talk about the Antonov, the AN 225. That for those of you that don't know, I would assume in this industry, if you're listening to this podcast, you're pretty familiar with the global trade and transportation. Obviously, the Antonov is a Russian-Ukrainian aircraft that was built in the late 80s. I think this particular one first flew in 1988, and it was designed to support the Russian equivalent of our NASA. I think they called it Buran, and to take their space shuttle equivalent up to space. 91, when Soviet Union fell, it kind of got repurposed into this massive cargo airplane that travels all over the world and does a lot of humanitarian relief. But unfortunately, during the recent attacks, and obviously Russia's going after airports and gateways that this was affected and pretty much destroyed. And it is literally was one of a kind. I won't go into the minutia of how big it was and size and scope. But you know what? What I'd like to do is ask our audience to put some stories together, some pictures. If you're listening to this and you make it to halftime, post some stories. I have seen one at the Denver International Airport once. To be honest with you, I don't know if it was the AN 225 or not, but it's an amazing series of aircraft, and this was one of a kind. So I know there's a lot of niche guys out there that love trains and things, but this has nostalgia written all over it, and it really sucks that this thing in our industry was such a beacon of amazement of what technology can do to help out the world as it's done in the last 30 years. So it's sad to hear what transpired, and I wanted to give a shout out and ask our listeners to post some pictures and tell us some stories related to the Antonov AN 225.
I've never seen it, Doug.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen pictures, but I've never I've never seen one up close. I've never seen one at an airport. And when I was at Crane, there were a lot of times that those guys, particularly on the military side, would
Mm,
be engaged in leases. I would have loved to have seen one because, like you said, they're technical marvels,
yeah.
and it's a real shame. I'm sure there's a lot of beautiful things like lives and homes that have been destroyed and technology's been destroyed, and it's awful all around. It's awful all
Yeah.
around, and it's the topic. It's the topic everywhere you go. How is this going to affect trade and everything else? It's just
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
sour thing to have to talk about.
Wow. All right, man. We'll let you jump in on your second topic.
Yeah. So, last week on the show, we talked about the cyber attack that Expeditors suffered. And I had a meeting with an ocean carrier this week where we discussed the massive amounts of acquisitions that are being made right now.
Mm,
And I said, there are there's a lot of chatter around cyber readiness right now because of this recent event. And I've done nothing but sound the alarm for going on 13 years now that
mhm,
somebody needs to pay attention to this. And there's a new wrinkle I wanted to introduce, and that's that all of these huge shipping companies, liners, just replete with cash from having a couple of great years, are making big acquisitions. They're buying one another. So, Liner A, Maersk as an example, just bought Pilot, right? You've got all these companies buying these smaller companies or large companies. When they buy them, they have to integrate each other from an IT perspective. And I wonder if they're bearing in mind all of the very important cybersecurity issues and policies and gremlins that come along with that. They become not only a big, juicy target, but they become a liability.
mm,
Because when you start to integrate these new companies, that integration begins, you have to meld the cybersecurity of both of them. And in doing so, you create a weak link. And I'm not sure that we're paying as much of an attention to that as we ought to be. And in the I guess the Schadenfreude that people are having, enjoying watching a large freight forwarder fall, I think it's a shame to even consider that and to feel that way. Uh, this could happen to anybody. It'll
mhm,
probably happen to you next. And rather than sitting here crowing about it, I think you should probably pay a little more attention to what your cybersecurity is, get engaged, and begin to think about what your policy is going to be when you get hit and how you're going to maintain your operations. Because it's going to happen to all of us. It's just a matter of time. We
mhm,
used to worry about our warehouses being broken into. We need to worry about our IT infrastructure being broken into because it's going to happen to each and every one of us, buddy.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point, and we talked about that on our prediction show back in December about how the flush with cash our industry is, and the fact that there's outside markets realizing that this is a great industry to invest in. So the mergers and acquisitions that you're talking about, we talked about back in December, and it will continue to grow. Here's the fundamental thing, and I don't mean to simplify this, but I truly believe this in my heart. Cyber is not tangible, right? And it's hard for people to grasp around the implications or what's going on. If somebody steals my car or breaks into my warehouse, it's tangible and I can build a fence or a wall, tangible. So the whole concept of cybersecurity, I think, is gaining more interest, more concern, and awareness. Expeditors was a target a couple of weeks ago, and things of that nature. But that will help. Unfortunately, the more attacks, the more awareness, the more people will take seriously. But it's just not tangible and it's hard to grasp. And I went out to a Nuggets game this weekend with a great friend of mine, and she was talking about her ID or her identity was stolen that week, and she had to do a whole bunch of stuff, right? I mean, she got hit. She got a bunch of money taken. But you know what? She called her bank. She canceled her credit cards. There's like 5 or 6 things that she did, and her life was pretty much back to normal. Now, not all the way normal, but 5 or 6 tangible things that she did, and it was fixed. Um, and so that's on a very minuscule basis, but it was an inconvenience for her. It wasn't catastrophic. And because it's not tangible, I think people have difficulty understanding the mega implications of cyber attack. And unfortunately, I think people will not fully grasp that until it happens again and again and again and again. And you exactly nailed it. You are at a liability and your walls are down during an integration of any type of company that you acquire. And so it'll be interesting to see. It's going to continue to go. And I was not a believer back in the day, Pete, but when you and I started the show a year and a half ago, you opened my eyes. So that's my take on the cyber.
Yeah, it's madness, man. I just hope people actually start to pay attention.
Yeah.
All right, buddy, take us home.
All right. This is going back to the airline piece of it. And I went up skiing this weekend, Pete, by myself. My wife was in Chicago. Probably the best day I've had all year. Crushed it. I'm still sore from today. And I was talking to Keenan. There's a couple of runs that I don't even know how I got down. And I'm still alive. But anyway, my point is I was listening to a podcast on the way up to the mountains, and it was talking about supersonic flight and how that is coming back around. There's a company that's leading the charge called Boom, BOOM. And it was real interesting. I won't go into the details of what they spoke about. Essentially, like why all of a sudden is it back, and why did it take 50 years for it to become mainstream again? But I started thinking, because of our industry, what does that mean for air cargo? And my take on that, Pete, is it means nothing for air cargo in the sense that nobody's throwing anything on a supersonic flight anytime soon. The concept of getting from point A to point B in half the time is phenomenal. But what's going to happen with these jets is it's going to be private aircraft. It's going to be for governments, and it's going to be they're private, right? The idea of you and I jumping on a commercial supersonic flight in the next 5 to 7 years is pretty small. And even then, the revenue from that plane is going to be generated from the occupants and the riders of that aircraft. They could give 2 shits about throwing some extra cargo in the belly of the plane for a few extra dollars. So I just thought it was interesting, in my personal opinion, when supersonic flight comes around, and I think it will happen. It's really not going to be any impact or advantage to our air cargo industry. So we can get excited about the flying of it. You can spend a hell of a lot of money to jump in that airplane, but it's not going to be used very much for cargo.
So I got two interesting bon mots to go with this one. The first is I never saw the Antonov, but I did fly in the Concorde.
Wow.
So back when I worked for a big consulting firm and had clients where money was no object in the 90s, I did get to fly from London to New York. And it was the most uncomfortable, overhyped, ridiculous, pointless waste of money I think I've ever been engaged in. Was it cool to lord over all of my friends? Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. Do I still have the sterling silver British Airways luggage tag? Oh, you bet your ass I do. Did it serve any real purpose? No. Like it was nice. It was nice. It was cool watching the speedometer, tick up there and all that. And it was great, drinking champagne in a cramped little aircraft. But honestly, the whole point of this is if you're an individual that can spend that kind of money to deal with the engineering difficulties that come with it, then to be able to find a pilot who's rated to fly something like that, keep them employed directly for you and nobody else, deal with the fact that air traffic control's got to manage your flight all the way across, which in itself is dangerous. Good for you. But if you're going to spend all that money to make that aircraft, you're not going to put a lot of space on it, like you said, for moving cargo. Now, those Concords did do hand carries. And from what I understand, they were repulsively expensive. And they were mostly used for things like, medical and last minute, like diplomatic stuff and things like that. It was not like, Doug and Pete's air freight service, right? There comes a point where moving something via air freight, there's a tipping point on cost where it just doesn't make sense. You might as well just find it locally. And it has to be impossible to get any other way. The idea also of flying from one place to another that fast becomes in and of itself problematic, because of all the technology that we have that's akin and worked on to these typical jet aircrafts that we have now. You have to completely rearrange everything in our infrastructure to deal with them. The jet bridges, the insights on the insides of our terminals. Are we going to build a whole new infrastructure for these planes? No. So you're going to have Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all these other billionaires possibly flying around on those. I don't think Doug and Pete are. Do I think it's cool? Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely cool. But do I think it's got anything to do with cargo? Probably not. Not for a long, long time.
Yeah.
The U.S. military's had jets and this technology for a crap ton of time. They still move things around in KC-130s, dude. That tells you a lot.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great point to end on. I love it. Yeah. So, all right.
All right. So that means it's my turn now to close this out.
Wrap it up.
So by the way, Doug, you should never, ever say that the best day you've had in a long time was one without your wife because she was away. Because I'm sure that's not going to go very well tonight when you have dinner with her. Tonight, the day she came back was the best day you've had in a while.
Well, it was the same day. So it was skiing in the morning and an airport pickup in the afternoon. So I got it covered there.
Nice save, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, so for Keenan back in the booth, who's probably having a Lunchable right now, watching some SpongeBob, and from Doug and I, we want to thank all of you for watching. We especially want to thank the good folks at Cap Logistics who support us in every way possible to bring you this content. And we love hearing from you. So please keep the comments coming. Please keep the messages coming. Tell a friend. Never miss it. We'll see you again next time for another episode of Global Trade This Week. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Pete. Have fun out there.